My name is Cassandra Mitchell. I'm 32, and I never thought I'd be curled up on a doorstep with pneumonia while my own sister watched through the window. The same sister whose mortgage I secretly paid. The same parents who called me dramatic while I struggled to breathe. Family betrayal cuts deep, but what they didn't know is that I held all the cards in a game they didn't realize we were playing. Before I tell you how I went from being curled up sick on my sister's doorstep to watching her world collapse, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and subscribe if you want more stories about family karma. Growing up as the eldest daughter in the Mitchell family was like being the understudy for the lead role in a play. Always prepared, never appreciated. From the moment my sister Abigail was born when I was 4, I watched my parents' attention shift like a spotlight to their new star. It wasn't that they were cruel to me. They just always seemed to have their brightness setting turned down whenever I entered a room. Our childhood home in suburban Massachusetts echoed with Abby this and Abby that. Her ballet recitals warranted professional photography. My honor roll certificates were taped to the refrigerator until they yellowed and curled. When Abigail wanted horseback riding lessons, my parents found the money. When I needed a laptop for college applications, I worked evenings at the local diner to save up. "Cassie, you're just more self-sufficient," my mother Rachel would say, as if independence was something I'd chosen rather than had thrust upon me. "Abby needs more guidance." I left for college with a partial scholarship and mountains of student debt, determined to prove I could succeed without the safety net my sister took for granted. 4 years of business classes, internships, and networking led to a position at a financial firm in Boston. Hard work and natural aptitude for numbers helped me climb from analyst to senior advisor by the time I turned 30. My apartment wasn't fancy, but it was mine, paid for with money I earned. Meanwhile, Abigail drifted through 3 different college majors before settling on communications, only to abandon her career after 2 years to find herself. She moved back into our parents' home, supposedly temporarily, but that temporary stay had stretched to 5 years when our parents decided to retire to Florida. "We can't sell the house," my mother told me during a rare phone call. "Abby isn't ready to be on her own yet. She's sensitive." What they didn't tell me was that they could no longer afford the mortgage payments on their retirement income. I discovered this when my father Brian called me in tears, explaining they were 3 months behind and facing foreclosure. Without hesitation, I paid the overdue amount and quietly arranged to buy the house from them, allowing them to save face by pretending they were still the owners who were letting Abigail stay there. So there I was, at 32, secretly paying the mortgage on a house where my sister lived rent-free, believing she was doing our parents a favor by house-sitting. I told myself I was being generous, taking care of my family the way they never took care of me. In reality, I was still that little girl desperate for approval, hoping that if I gave enough, they might finally see me. Every month, I'd drive the 40 minutes from Boston to visit. Abigail would complain about the neighbors, the plumbing, the weather, never once considering that her comfort came at someone else's expense. My parents would call from Florida during these visits, always asking if I was being nice to my sister, as if I were the hurricane threatening her calm waters. The warning signs were there, like lightning before a storm. The way Abigail would forget I was coming and have friends over, forcing me to sit awkwardly in the corner of what was technically my own living room. The passive-aggressive texts about how I never helped enough with house maintenance. The times she accidentally donated a box of my childhood mementos I'd been storing in the attic. "You're being too sensitive," my mother said when I called about the lost box. "Abby's doing her best to keep things organized." Despite everything, I maintained the relationship. I told myself that family was family, that blood meant something. I ignored my best friend Stephanie's concerned looks when I canceled plans to fix Abigail's leaky faucet or attend my 4th housewarming party. Each time she rearranged the furniture, she declared it a new beginning, worthy of celebration. Then came the week that changed everything. I'd been pulling long hours at work, preparing for quarterly client reviews. My boss Lawrence had noticed my pallor and persistent cough. "Cassandra, go home," he said firmly after hearing me hack my way through a presentation. "Whatever you have, we don't want it. Take a few days." I should have gone straight to my apartment, but I'd promised Abigail I'd help her assemble a bookcase that weekend. Given how busy I'd been, I thought I'd head to her place, my place really, a day early, get some rest there, and be ready to help her in the morning. It seemed like a simple enough plan. I had no idea I was driving straight into the eye of a storm that would tear down everything I thought I knew about my family. The first sign that something was seriously wrong came when I nearly blacked out at a red light. The world swam before my eyes, and I had to pull over to catch my breath. My lungs felt like they were filled with concrete, and heat radiated from my skin despite the November chill. After sitting for 10 minutes with my head against the steering wheel, I managed to continue driving, though in retrospect, I should have called an ambulance right then. By the time I pulled into the driveway of my family home, climbing the 3 porch steps felt like scaling Everest. I leaned heavily on the doorbell. Too weak to fish out the key, I rarely used out of respect for Abigail's privacy. When the door swung open, Abigail's expression shifted from annoyance to alarm and then, strangely, to irritation. "Cassie? What are you doing here? You look terrible." She didn't move from the doorway. "I think I'm really sick." I managed between shallow breaths. "Can I come in? I need to lie down." She hesitated, glancing behind her. "I have friends coming over tonight. Are you contagious?" The absurdity of the question barely registered through my fever. "I don't know. Maybe?" "Please, Abby, I can barely stand." With obvious reluctance, she stepped aside. "Fine, but stay in the guest room. And don't touch anything in the common areas. I don't want my friends getting sick." The guest room was technically my old bedroom, though Abigail had long since converted it into a home office/craft room/storage space. I stumbled past her and collapsed onto the daybed, still covered in boxes of her seasonal decorations. "You're being dramatic," she said, hovering in the doorway. "It's probably just a cold." The room spun as I tried to focus on her face. "Can you get me some water? And maybe some Tylenol? I think I have a high fever." She sighed as if I'd asked her to hand wash my laundry. "Give me a minute." The minutes stretched to 20 before she returned with a lukewarm glass of water and 2 pills. By then, I was shivering violently despite feeling like I was burning from the inside out. "I think I need to go to the doctor," I whispered. "The urgent care is closed by now, and the ER will be packed on a Friday night," she replied dismissively. "Just sleep it off. You'll feel better in the morning." My phone rang, my parents' ringtone. Abigail answered it before I could reach for it. "Hi, Mom. Yeah, Cassie's here?" "No, she just showed up. She says she's sick." "I know, right? In the middle of a pandemic." "No, probably just a cold." She handed me the phone. My mother's voice sounded tinny and distant. "Cassandra, why didn't you tell us you were visiting? Abigail had plans tonight." "Mom," I rasped, "I think I have pneumonia. I need to see a doctor." "Oh, honey, you always were prone to exaggeration. Remember when you thought you broke your arm in 7th grade, and it was just a sprain?" "This is different," I insisted, but a coughing fit overtook me. "See," I heard my dad say in the background, "just a bad cold. Tell her to take some NyQuil and stop scaring her sister." The conversation continued in this vein until I didn't have the energy to argue anymore. I hung up and fell into a fitful sleep, waking occasionally to cough so hard I saw stars. Morning brought no relief. If anything, I felt worse, my chest tighter, my breathing more labored. When I shuffled to the bathroom, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. Ghostly pale except for 2 bright spots of color high on my cheeks, dark circles under my eyes, lips tinged slightly blue. I found Abigail in the kitchen, angrily scrubbing countertops. "You left your water glass in the living room," she snapped without looking at me. "Sorry," I mumbled. "I need to go to urgent care. Can you drive me?" "I don't think I should be behind the wheel." She straightened, spraying disinfectant with unnecessary force. "I can't. I have yoga at 10, then brunch with Madison and Taylor. You shouldn't have come here if you were this sick." "I didn't know I was this sick," I protested weakly. "Please, Abby. I'll call an Uber, but can you at least wait with me until it comes?" "No, I can't," she said, her voice rising. In fact, I think you should leave altogether. I don't want whatever you have. What if it's COVID? Did you even think about that? About me? The irony of her concern, after 2 years of flouting pandemic guidelines while I'd been careful, might have made me laugh if I could have taken a deep enough breath to do so. I'm vaccinated, and I took a test yesterday. It was negative, I said, leaning against the doorframe for support. Please, I'm really scared. I can barely breathe. Always with the drama, she exclaimed, throwing her hands up. This is exactly like you, Cassie, making everything about yourself. I have a life too, you know. I have plans. My phone rang again, my parents. Abigail snatched it from my hand and put it on speaker. Mom, Dad, will you please tell Cassie she needs to leave? She's really sick, and I don't want to catch it. I have that interview on Monday. What interview? I asked, genuinely confused. For the receptionist position at Dr. Klein's office, my mother answered for her, pride evident in her voice. It's very prestigious. They only hire people with the right presentation. But I'm sick, I repeated, feeling like I was speaking a language no one else understood. I might need to go to the hospital. Now you're just being ridiculous, my father chimed in. Abigail, is she coughing? Yes, all night. I barely slept. See? It's just a bad cold. Cassandra, stop trying to get attention and go back to your apartment if you're not feeling well. Your sister shouldn't have to play nurse. The room tilted dangerously, and I had to sit down on a kitchen chair. I don't think I can drive back to Boston like this. Then call one of your fancy work friends, Abigail snapped. I want you out of here in an hour, or I'm calling the police and telling them you're trespassing. Trespassing? I echoed, disbelieving. In our family home? It's my home now, she corrected. Mom and Dad left it to me to take care of. The cruel irony of her statement might have been funny if it weren't so painful. If she only knew who actually owned the house she was throwing me out of. Abigail, my mother's voice softened. Maybe that's a bit extreme. Cassie can stay in her room until she feels better. No. Abigail's face contorted. I'm not getting sick because she can't take care of herself. She has an hour. She ended the call before our parents could respond, then stood over me with her arms crossed. 59 minutes now. Moving as if underwater, I somehow managed to gather my overnight bag. Each item I picked up required a pause to catch my breath. Abigail followed me around, maintaining a 6-foot distance while hurrying me along. Don't forget your charger, she said, pointing rather than helping. Abby, I tried one last time as I stood swaying in the entryway. Please. I've always been there for you. For a moment, something like uncertainty crossed her face. Then she hardened again. No, you've always been showing off, making me look bad. Miss Perfect with her fancy job and her financial independence. Well, I have independence too. This is my house, and I decide who stays here. The door closed in my face with such finality that I felt it like a physical blow. I stumbled to my car and sat there, struggling to breathe, trying to process what had just happened. My own sister had thrown me out while I was seriously ill. My parents had taken her side. In that moment, something inside me, some last thread of family loyalty, snapped clean in two. With shaking hands, I called the only person I knew would never turn me away. Cassie? What's wrong? You sound terrible. Stephanie's voice through the car speaker was like a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. Need help? I managed before another coughing fit overtook me. At my parents' old house. Can't drive. Stay there. I'm coming. Should I call an ambulance? No, just you. Please. I'm already grabbing my keys. Don't move. I must have drifted in and out of consciousness because the next thing I knew, Stephanie was rapping on my car window, her face twisted with concern. She helped me into her car, exclaiming over my fever when her hand touched my forehead. What happened? Why are you sitting in your car? Where's your sister? I gestured weakly toward the house, where the curtains were conspicuously drawn. Kicked me out. Said I'd infect her. Stephanie's expression darkened in a way I'd never seen before. She did what? Later, I whispered. Hospital. Please. The emergency room was a blur of masks, questions, and needles. Words like severe pneumonia, dangerously high fever, and oxygen saturation floated around me. A chest X-ray confirmed what my body had been trying to tell everyone. Both my lungs were significantly infected. You should have come in days ago, the doctor said, her brow furrowed as she reviewed my results. Were you having symptoms before today? Just thought it was a cold. I gasped through the oxygen mask they'd placed over my face. She tried to tell her family. Stephanie interjected, her hand tight around mine. They wouldn't listen. The doctor's expression was unreadable behind her surgical mask, but her eyes reflected a mixture of concern and disapproval. Well, you're listening to me now. You're being admitted. This isn't something we can treat on an outpatient basis. They kept me for 3 days, pumping antibiotics into my veins and monitoring my oxygen levels. Stephanie visited during every allowable period, bringing comfortable pajamas, my phone charger, and a fierce loyalty that made me wonder why I'd wasted so much energy on people who couldn't be bothered to check if I was still breathing. My phone buzzed occasionally with texts from my parents. Abigail says you left in a huff. So dramatic. Call your sister and apologize for exposing her to your germs. Why aren't you answering? We raised you better than to hold grudges. Stephanie read these over my shoulder during one visit and had to walk out of the room to calm down. They don't know you're in the hospital, do they? She asked when she returned. I shook my head weakly. Doesn't matter. It absolutely matters. She paced at the foot of my bed. Cassie, this has to stop. They treat you like garbage, and you keep going back for more. You own their house, for God's sake. Sure, I cautioned, though there was no one to overhear. The habit of protecting my family's pride was deeply ingrained. No, I won't shh. You nearly died in your car outside a house you pay for because your sister was worried about being late to yoga. This isn't normal. This isn't okay. As the antibiotics began to work and my fever subsided, I drifted in and out of uneasy dreams. Childhood memories surfaced like debris after a storm. My 10th birthday party, canceled because Abigail had a cold. The college acceptance letter my parents barely acknowledged while celebrating Abigail's role as an extra in the school play. The time I broke my wrist falling from a tree and waited 3 hours for my parents to pick me up because Abigail's soccer practice couldn't be missed. When I was discharged, Stephanie insisted I stay with her. Your apartment has too many stairs and you still need rest. No arguments. My boss Lawrence called while Stephanie was driving me to her place. Cassandra, where have you been? We've been worried. Hospital. I croaked, my voice still raw. Pneumonia. There was a moment of silence then. Why didn't you say something? Take all the time you need. Your clients are covered. Just focus on getting better. The contrast between his response and my family's wasn't lost on me. Over the next week, as I slowly regained my strength on Stephanie's comfortable sofa, the texts from my family became increasingly hostile. Your silence is very immature. Abigail had to miss her interview because she woke up with a scratchy throat. Thanks a lot. We raised you to be responsible, not vindictive. Stephanie confiscated my phone after finding me in tears, struggling to breathe through the tightness in my chest that was now as much emotional as physical. Enough, she said firmly. You're done being their emotional punching bag. She was right. As clarity returned with my health, I realized something had fundamentally changed inside me. The desperate need for approval that had driven me for 32 years had been burned away by fever and betrayal. In its place was something new, a cool, clear-eyed understanding that I deserved better. I need to make some calls, I told Stephanie on my 7th day of recovery. And I think I need a lawyer. Benjamin Hayes of Hayes & Associates had been handling my investment portfolio for 3 years. He looked surprised to see me in his office, especially in my still weakened state. Cassandra, good to see you, though I wish you looked better. What can I do for you today? Your quarterly review isn't for another month. I placed a folder on his desk. I need to discuss some real estate matters. His eyebrows rose as I explained the situation with my family home, how I'd purchased it to help my parents avoid foreclosure, how they'd maintained the fiction that they still owned it, how my sister was living there rent-free while believing she was doing them a favor. And now, I concluded, I need to know my options as the legal owner. Benjamin leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. Well, legally speaking, your options are quite straightforward. As the owner, you can decide who lives there and under what conditions. You can evict your sister with proper notice, sell the property, or start charging rent. And the utilities? I asked. They're in my name, but the bills are set to auto-pay from my account. Again, as the account holder, you control those services. He studied me carefully. May I ask what you're planning? I handed him the second folder, printouts of text messages, medical records, and bank statements. I want to send a message, and I want it to be legal, documented, and impossible to misinterpret. As I outlined my plan, Benjamin's professional demeanor cracked enough to reveal a glimmer of admiration. It's certainly within your rights, he said, though it might permanently damage your relationship with your family. The relationship is already damaged, I replied, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. I'm just finally acknowledging it. Back at Stephanie's apartment, we spread documents across her dining table. Mortgage statements showing 3 years of payments from my account, utility bills in my name, the property deed with my signature, medical records detailing my hospitalization for pneumonia, and screenshots of every dismissive, gaslighting text my family had sent. Are you sure about this? Stephanie asked, not for the first time. It's going to be nuclear. I nodded, sorting papers into neat piles. I've spent my whole life being the responsible one, the understanding one, the one who gives without expecting anything in return. Where has it gotten me? Literally left out in the cold while I was seriously ill. My hands shook slightly as I drafted an email to my boss Lawrence, requesting another week of leave. His response was immediate and supportive. Take all the time you need. Your health comes first. Another stark contrast to my family's reaction. I called the mortgage company next, explaining that I needed to temporarily stop the automatic payments. The representative was professionally neutral, assuring me that as the account holder, it was entirely my prerogative. The utility companies were equally accommodating. As the name on the accounts, I had every right to suspend service temporarily. I scheduled the electricity, water, and internet to be disconnected the following Monday, giving myself the weekend to mentally prepare for the fallout. What about your parents? Stephanie asked as we worked. They're not living there, but they still think they own the place. They made their position clear, I said, showing her the latest text from my mother. Abigail says you're still not answering her calls. This childish silent treatment needs to stop. They chose their side. I continued. And it wasn't mine. Not when I was a child, not when I was sick, not ever. Benjamin's office prepared a formal letter explaining the situation. That I was the legal owner of the property, that I had been covering all expenses out of familial goodwill, and that in light of recent events, the current living arrangement would need to change. Attached were copies of the deed, proof of mortgage payments, and a notice that the utilities would be temporarily suspended pending a new agreement. A separate section outlined my medical condition at the time I was forced to leave the property, including the doctor's statement that delaying treatment could have led to serious complications. The final paragraph gave my sister 30 days to either vacate the premises or begin paying market-rate rent, with the first month due immediately to restore utility services. It's straightforward, legally sound, and impossible to misconstrue, Benjamin assured me. My office will deliver it by courier to ensure it's received. That night, I stood at Stephanie's window, looking out at the city lights. For the first time since my illness, I took a deep breath without pain. The weight that had pressed on my chest for years, the constant striving for approval, the endless giving without receiving, was lifting. Whatever happens tomorrow, I told Stephanie, I won't regret it. She squeezed my shoulder. Good. It's about time you put yourself first. The courier was scheduled to deliver the package at 10 a.m. I imagined the scene. Abigail, probably still in her pajamas despite it being mid-morning, accepting a formal envelope without any idea that her comfortable world was about to implode. I set my phone on the coffee table and waited. The first call came at 10:17 a.m., Abigail's name flashing on my screen. I let it go to voicemail. Cassie, what the hell is this? Some guy just delivered legal papers saying you own the house? Call me back right now. The second call came 3 minutes later. Then the third. By noon, I had 17 missed calls and a string of increasingly frantic text messages. This isn't funny. Is this some kind of joke? Mom and Dad are freaking out. Call me back. At 2:13 p.m., the tenor changed. The power just went out. What did you do? By 3:45, desperation had set in. The water's off too. Cassie, this is insane. Turn everything back on. My parents joined the barrage around 4 p.m., their messages shifting rapidly from confusion to anger to disbelief. Cassandra, what is going on? Abigail says you're claiming to own the house. This is a terrible misunderstanding. Call us immediately. We didn't raise you to be vindictive. Turn the utilities back on right now. Stephanie monitored the messages with me, occasionally reading them aloud in increasingly dramatic voices until I was actually laughing, a strange, liberating sound I hadn't heard from myself in weeks. Oh, this is my favorite, she announced, holding up my phone. I have rights as a tenant. She just admitted she's a tenant, not an owner. She still doesn't get it, I said, shaking my head. She thinks this is about the house. At 6:30 p.m., my father called Stephanie's phone, a number he'd only used once before, years ago, when planning a surprise birthday party for me. Should I answer? She asked. I nodded. Put it on speaker. Hello, Brian, she said coolly. Stephanie, thank God. Is Cassandra with you? She's not answering her phone, and we have a situation here. She's right here. And yes, I know about the situation. My father's voice immediately shifted to the conciliatory tone he used when trying to smooth over Abigail's mistakes. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. Some mix-up with the house paperwork. And now the utilities are off, and Abigail is very upset. It's not a mix-up, I said, loud enough for him to hear. I bought the house 3 years ago when you couldn't make the payments. I've been paying the mortgage and utilities ever since. Silence then. Cassie? What are you talking about? Check your records, Dad. The bank was foreclosing. I paid the overdue amount and took over the mortgage to keep you from losing the house. It's all there in black and white. But why wouldn't you tell us? Because you and Mom didn't want to admit you needed help. And I was willing to let you save face. Until now. Another pause, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice had hardened. This is about Abigail asking you to leave when you were sick, isn't it? You're punishing her over a little disagreement. A little disagreement? I repeated, incredulous. I was hospitalized with severe pneumonia. The doctor said if I'd waited much longer to get treatment, I could have died. Don't be dramatic, Cassandra. My mother's voice cut in. They'd apparently put their phone on speaker too. It was a bad cold. I have the medical records, I said flatly. They're included in the packet from my lawyer, along with all the texts you both sent accusing me of overreacting. Lawyer? My father sounded genuinely shocked. You got a lawyer involved in a family matter? Yes, because this isn't just a family matter. It's a legal one. I own the house. I pay the bills. And I'm no longer willing to support someone who would throw me out when I was desperately ill. So this is blackmail, my mother said, her voice cold. Turn the utilities back on or Abigail is homeless.
No, incorrect.
This is consequences. Abigail has 2 options, clearly outlined in the letter. She can move out within 30 days, or she can start paying rent, actual market rate rent, not the $0 she's been paying. Her choice. I could hear Abigail wailing in the background, something about how unfair this was, how cruel I was being. And one more thing, I added. I want an apology. A real one. Not, I'm sorry you feel that way, or I'm sorry but. A genuine acknowledgement of how wrong it was to put me out while I was sick. This isn't like you, Cassie, my mother said. attempting a different approach. You've always been so understanding, so generous. You're right, it isn't like me. The old me would have accepted your excuses, paid the bills, and continued to be taken for granted. But nearly dying in my car outside a house I own was a wake-up call. I'm done being the family doormat. The conversation deteriorated from there, with my parents cycling through guilt trips, accusations, and finally, when those didn't work, grudging negotiations. What about a payment plan? My father suggested. Abigail can't afford market rent all at once. That's between her and my lawyer now, I replied. The letter explains everything. Read it carefully. After I hung up, Stephanie gave me a high five. I am so proud of you. How do you feel? I considered the question seriously. Lighter. Like I've put down a heavy backpack I've been carrying for years.
Good.
That's exactly how you should feel. The next morning, Benjamin called to inform me that Abigail had shown up at his office unannounced, demanding to see me. I explained that I'm your legal representative, not your receptionist, he said, a hint of amusement in his voice. She was quite vocal about her displeasure. Did she bring a check for the rent? I asked.
No.
She brought a handwritten list of reasons why she shouldn't have to pay, including, and I quote, familial emotional equity. I couldn't help but laugh. That sounds like Abigail. I reiterated the options outlined in our letter. She left in quite a state. Later that afternoon, Stephanie nudged me. You need to see this. She handed me her phone, opened to Abigail's Instagram page. My sister had posted a tear-streaked selfie with a lengthy caption about being betrayed by blood and left without basic necessities by someone who promised to always be there. The comments section was filled with sympathetic responses from friends who had no idea of the true situation. Should I be upset about this? I asked, genuinely unsure.
No, Stephanie replied firmly.
She's showing her true colors. Let her. The social media drama escalated when my Aunt Helen, my mother's sister, commented. There are two sides to every story. Have you told your followers why Cassie did this? Within hours, my extended family was weighing in from both sides. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years were texting me for details. My Uncle Thomas, always the family peacemaker, called to offer his services as a mediator. I appreciate the offer, I told him, but this isn't a misunderstanding. It's a long overdue boundary. 2 days after the utilities were shut off, Abigail tried a new tactic, showing up at my workplace. Security called up to warn me that a woman claiming to be my sister was causing a scene in the lobby. She's quite insistent on seeing you, the guard explained apologetically. Lawrence, passing by my desk as I took the call, raised an eyebrow. I covered the receiver and briefly explained the situation. Without hesitation, he gestured for me to hand him the phone. This is Lawrence Pearson, Senior VP. I understand there's a disturbance in the lobby involving one of my team members. Please escort the individual from the building immediately. Ms. Mitchell is not available and will not be made available. If the individual refuses to leave, please contact the police. He handed the phone back. Family trouble? Something like that. I admitted. Thank you. He nodded once. We protect our own here. Take the rest of the day if you need it. That evening, my parents tried a direct approach, showing up unannounced at Stephanie's apartment. They must have been desperate to make the 3-hour drive from Florida. Stephanie peered through the peephole and turned to me, wide-eyed. It's your parents. How did they even know where I live? Probably from that birthday party you hosted for me 2 years ago. I stood frozen in indecision. I don't think I can face them right now. You don't have to, she said firmly. She cracked the door open, security chains still in place. Brian, Rachel, this isn't a good time. We need to see Cassandra, my mother insisted. This has gone far enough. Cassie is still recovering from pneumonia, Stephanie replied coolly. The pneumonia she developed while sitting in her car after being thrown out of her own house. She'll contact you when she's ready. Now listen here. My father began, but Stephanie cut him off. No, you listen. Your daughter nearly died, and neither of you could be bothered to check on her. You don't get to show up now demanding anything. Good night. She closed the door on their protests and turned to me with a shrug. Sorry if that was overstepping, but they needed to hear it. I hugged her tightly. Thank you for saying what I couldn't. That night, I received an unexpected text from my Aunt Helen. I saw the hospital records Abigail was waving around at your parents. I had no idea it was that serious. Are you okay now? Do you need anything? It was the first genuine concern anyone in my family had expressed since this all began.
I'm recovering, he replied.
Thank you for asking. For what it's worth, she wrote back, not everyone thinks you're in the wrong here.
Call me if you want to talk.
It was a small olive branch, but it meant more than I expected. Perhaps not everyone in my family was as blind to the dynamics as I'd feared. A week into the standoff, Benjamin called with news. Your sister has retained counsel. A Jackson Montgomery from a small family law practice. Is that a problem? I asked, tension immediately tightening my chest. Not at all. Mr. Montgomery has requested a meeting to discuss terms. I believe this indicates she's finally taking the situation seriously. We scheduled the meeting for the following Tuesday at Benjamin's office. I would attend by video conference, still not ready to face my family in person. The weekend brought more drama. Abigail's Instagram crusade had expanded to include tearful TikTok videos about toxic family members and financial abuse. She never mentioned the small detail of having thrown her sick sister out of the house she'd been living in rent-free for years. Some mutual acquaintances who'd seen her posts reached out to me, clearly fishing for gossip. I declined to engage, simply stating that there was more to the story than Abigail was sharing. My parents, meanwhile, had retreated into injured silence after being turned away from Stephanie's apartment. The only communication was a text from my father. We're staying at the Holiday Inn downtown until this is resolved. We raised you better than this. I showed Stephanie, who snorted. They raised you to be a pushover. You're finally standing up for yourself, and they can't handle it. On Monday morning, I received a call from my boss, Lawrence. Cassandra, I hate to bother you during your leave, but there's something you should know. Your sister has been calling clients, trying to get their contact information. My blood ran cold.
What?
How would she even know who my clients are? She doesn't specifically. She's been calling the general line, saying she needs to reach you about a family emergency. Fortunately, our reception staff followed protocol and didn't give out any information. I'm so sorry about this, I said, mortified. I had no idea she would go this far. Don't apologize. It's not your fault. I just wanted you to be aware. We've flagged her number in our system and instructed security not to allow her in the building under any circumstances. The boundary violations were escalating, cementing my resolve. This wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about establishing that I wouldn't tolerate being mistreated, manipulated, or harassed. Tuesday's meeting began tense and grew worse. Benjamin had reserved a conference room with video capabilities. I joined from Stephanie's dining room, dressed professionally despite still feeling weak from my illness. Abigail arrived with her lawyer, a harried-looking man in his 50s. My parents insisted on attending as well, though they had no legal standing in the matter. Let's get straight to the point, Benjamin began after introductions. Ms. Mitchell owns the property in question. She has generously allowed her sister to live there rent-free for several years, covering all expenses including the mortgage and utilities. Recent events have caused her to reevaluate this arrangement. Recent events that have been greatly exaggerated, my mother interjected. Benjamin gave her a cool look. Mrs. Mitchell, with all due respect, we have medical documentation proving otherwise. Your daughter was hospitalized with severe pneumonia after being forced to leave her own property. She wasn't forced, Abigail protested, her face flushed. I just asked her to go home because she was sick. Well, she was too ill to drive safely, Benjamin countered. The medical records are quite clear on the severity of her condition upon admission to the emergency room. Jackson Montgomery cleared his throat. Regardless of past events, my client is interested in resolving this situation amicably. She's prepared to begin paying a reasonable rent. Define reasonable, Benjamin replied. Given the family relationship, we believe a significant discount from market rate would be appropriate. Perhaps $500 per month? I nearly laughed out loud. Market rent for a house of that size in that neighborhood was easily $2,500. That's not going to work, Benjamin said firmly. Ms. Mitchell has outlined her terms in the letter you received. Market rate rent, payable immediately to restore utilities, with a formal lease agreement going forward. That's extortion, my father exclaimed. No, Mr. Mitchell, that's real estate, Benjamin corrected. Your daughter has been providing free housing worth over $30,000 annually. She's under no obligation to continue doing so. After everything we've done for her, my mother muttered, just loud enough for the microphone to pick up. Something in me snapped. What exactly have you done for me, Mom? When have you ever put me first? When have you ever stood up for me against Abigail? We gave you everything, she replied indignantly. We supported your education. I worked my way through college, I interrupted. I took out student loans that I'm still paying off. Meanwhile, you paid Abigail's full tuition at a private university, which she never used for her career. That was different. She needed more help than me. Yes, I've heard that my entire life. I was always expected to be the responsible one, the self-sufficient one, while Abigail got endless second chances and support. And when I was literally fighting to breathe, you told me I was being dramatic and took her side. Again. The room fell silent. Even Abigail looked momentarily abashed. The terms are non-negotiable, Benjamin continued after a moment. Market rate rent beginning immediately, or vacate within 30 days. This is about punishment, Abigail accused, finding her voice again. You're punishing me because you're jealous of me. You've always been jealous. I stared at her through the screen, genuinely bewildered. Jealous of what, Abigail? Your lack of independence? Your need to be constantly coddled? Your inability to support yourself at 31? Jealous of how much Mom and Dad love me, she shot back. The words hung in the air, harsh and revealing. My parents didn't contradict her. You know what? You're right, I said quietly. I was jealous. For years, I wondered what it would be like to have parents who put me first sometimes, who celebrated my achievements, who came to my graduations instead of Abigail's dance recitals, who checked if I was okay when I was sick instead of worrying about whether I would infect their favorite child. Tears welled in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. But I'm not jealous anymore, because I've realized that their conditional love isn't worth having, and neither is your so-called sisterhood. Jackson Montgomery looked deeply uncomfortable. Perhaps we should take a brief recess. No need, I said, regaining my composure. My terms stand. Abigail can pay market rent or move out. Those are her only options. And the utilities, he asked, will be restored when the first month's rent is paid in full. My father leaned forward. And if we pay it, what then? Then the utilities will be turned back on, and Abigail can stay under a formal lease agreement. But let me be clear, this isn't just about money. This is about respect and boundaries. I won't be treated the way you've all treated me ever again. The meeting ended shortly after, with Montgomery requesting time to discuss options with his client. As the video conference ended, I caught a glimpse of my mother's face, a mix of anger and something that might have been realization. That evening, my Aunt Helen called. I heard about the meeting today. News travels fast, I said wearily. In this family, lightning speed. She paused. I want you to know that I understand why you're doing this. Your mother and father have always had a blind spot when it comes to Abigail. Thank you, I said, genuinely moved. That means a lot. Don't get me wrong, the utility shutoff was dramatic. But sometimes dramatic is the only way to get through to people who don't want to listen. She wasn't entirely wrong about the drama of it all. But after a lifetime of being ignored when I spoke softly, I needed to metaphorically shout to be heard. 2 days later, a certified check for $2,500 arrived at Benjamin's office, the first month's rent for the house. As promised, I called to have the utilities restored that same day. The gesture wasn't accompanied by an apology or any acknowledgement of wrongdoing. But it was a start, a concrete admission that the old dynamics could no longer continue. What now? Stephanie asked as we celebrated with takeout that evening. Now we draw up a formal lease, I said. And I start building a life that doesn't revolve around taking care of people who wouldn't do the same for me. It felt like a declaration of independence, not just from my family's expectations, but from my own patterns of people-pleasing and self-sacrifice. For the first time in my adult life, I was putting myself first without guilt or apology. And it felt right. 2 weeks after the utilities were restored, Benjamin arranged another meeting, this time at a neutral location, a conference room at a downtown hotel. I felt strong enough to attend in person, though Stephanie insisted on driving me. "I'll wait in the lobby," she said, "just in case you need a quick getaway." My parents arrived first, looking tired and subdued. My father's usual confident posture was diminished, his shoulders slightly hunched. My mother had dark circles under her eyes that her carefully applied makeup couldn't quite conceal. Abigail came in last, accompanied again by her lawyer. She looked different, less defiant, more thoughtful. She avoided my gaze as she took her seat across the table. Benjamin opened the meeting with a review of the lease agreement he'd prepared. Standard terms, market rate rent, responsibilities clearly delineated. My family listened without interruption. When he finished, there was a moment of silence. Then, to my surprise, Abigail spoke. "Before we sign anything, I have something to say." She took a deep breath. "I'm sorry, Cassie. I was wrong to make you leave when you were sick. I was thinking only about myself, and I was scared. But that's no excuse." I studied her face, looking for the manipulation I'd grown accustomed to seeing. But her expression seemed genuinely remorseful. "It wasn't just that day," I said quietly. "It was a pattern, a lifetime of patterns." "I know," she admitted, her voice small. "I've been thinking about it a lot these past weeks. About how differently we've been treated. About how much you've done for me, for all of us, without acknowledgement." My mother stirred uncomfortably. "We never meant to play favorites." "But you did," I replied, keeping my voice level. "And when it really mattered, when I was seriously ill, you took her side without question. Do you know how that felt? To be gaslit about my own health crisis by the people who should have cared most." My father cleared his throat. "We should have checked on you. Called the doctor ourselves instead of assuming it wasn't serious. That was wrong of us." "It was more than wrong," I said. "It was cruel. And it showed me exactly where I stand in this family, on the outside looking in, unless I'm needed for something." "That's not true," my mother protested, but without her usual conviction. "Isn't it? When was the last time either of you called just to check on me? Not to ask for money, not to mediate some crisis with Abigail, just to see how I was doing." Their silence was answer enough. "I want things to change," I continued. "Really change. Not just temporary behavior modifications until this blows over and we all slip back into our old roles. I won't do it anymore." "What do you want from us?" my father asked. "Respect. Acknowledgement. Actual reciprocity in our relationship." I looked each of them in the eye. "And I think we all need therapy, individually and as a family. If we're going to have any kind of relationship moving forward, that's my condition." Abigail looked startled. "Therapy?"
Yes.
"With a professional who can help us identify and change these toxic patterns." My parents exchanged glances. This clearly wasn't the resolution they'd expected. "We're not really therapy people," my mother began. "Then I'm not really a family doormat anymore," I replied evenly. "This is non-negotiable. You can stay in the house under the terms of the lease, Abigail, but if you want me in your life in any capacity, therapy is required." Benjamin, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "I've taken the liberty of researching family therapists in your area. Dr. Eleanor Webster comes highly recommended and specializes in adult family dynamics." He slid a business card across the table. My father picked it up, looking at it as if it might bite. "I've already scheduled a preliminary appointment for next Tuesday," I added. "You can either join me or not. Your choice." The meeting concluded with Abigail signing the lease agreement. As we gathered our things to leave, she hesitated, then asked in a small voice, "Do you think we can ever be okay again? As sisters?" I considered the question carefully. I don't know, but I'm willing to try if you are. Really try, with professional help and honest communication. She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. I'd like that. Outside the hotel, Stephanie was waiting as promised. How did it go? Better than expected, I admitted. They actually apologized and agreed to therapy.
Wow.
She looked impressed. That's unexpected. We'll see if they follow through. Words are easy, change is hard. The following Tuesday, I sat in Dr. Webster's waiting room, unsure if anyone else would show up. To my surprise, all three of them arrived, Abigail first, then my parents, looking uncomfortable but determined. That first session was awkward and painful. Years of resentment, favoritism, and unequal expectations were laid bare. My mother cried when I described how it felt to be always overlooked for Abigail. My father grew defensive, then quiet, as Dr. Webster gently pointed out patterns in his behavior. This is just the beginning, Dr. Webster cautioned as our time ended. Real change takes commitment and time. But it was a beginning. Over the next 6 months, we continued weekly sessions. Some were breakthrough moments, others were frustrating setbacks. There were weeks when I wanted to give up, to accept that my family might never truly see me or value me the way I deserved. But slowly, things began to shift. My mother started calling regularly, asking about my work, my friends, my life, without immediately pivoting to Abigail's latest drama. My father attended a therapy session alone with me, where he tearfully acknowledged how his own upbringing had shaped his parenting. I was raised to believe that the strong ones don't need as much attention, he admitted. My parents did the same to me as the oldest. I just perpetuated the cycle, without thinking. Abigail struggled the most with the new dynamics. Years of being the family focal point had shaped her identity, and she floundered initially without that constant attention. But therapy helped her too, revealing how the favoritism had stunted her growth and independence. I never had to develop coping skills, she confessed during one joint session. Why would I, when everyone rushed to solve my problems for me? But it didn't actually make me happy. It made me anxious and dependent. Outside of family therapy, my own life flourished. The pneumonia episode had been a harsh wake-up call about my priorities. I started taking better care of my physical health, setting boundaries at work, and deepening my friendships. Stephanie remained my staunchest ally, celebrating every small victory in my family journey. Look at you, creating a revolution with one utility shutoff, she joked. My relationship with Lawrence evolved too. Having seen him stand up for me during the crisis, I felt more confident advocating for myself professionally. I proposed a new client management system that earned me a promotion and a substantial raise. You've always had these ideas, he noted during my review. But now you're actually voicing them. It's good to see. 6 months after the confrontation, Abigail hosted a dinner at the house, now legitimately her home, with rent paid on time each month. It wasn't perfect. Old habits occasionally surfaced in our interactions. But there was a new awareness, a willingness to recognize and correct those patterns rather than falling back into them. As we sat around the table, my mother raised her glass. To new beginnings and hard-learned lessons. And to Cassie, Abigail added, surprising me, for having the courage to break the cycle, even when it was painful for all of us. I felt a weight lift that I hadn't even realized I was still carrying, the need for their validation, their approval. I no longer needed it the way I once had. I'd found my own value, independent of their recognition. To boundaries, I said, raising my own glass. And to family, the kind we choose to be, not just the kind we're born into. Later, as I helped clear the dishes, my Aunt Helen pulled me aside. I'm proud of you, she said simply. It took guts to do what you did. It wasn't about courage, I replied. It was about necessity. I couldn't keep living that way. That's exactly what courage is, she said. Doing the necessary thing, even when it's terrifying. Perhaps she was right. The journey from doormat to self-respect had been frightening, painful, and at times lonely. But standing on the other side, I wouldn't trade it for anything. That night, as I drove back to my apartment, finally feeling strong enough to live on my own again, I reflected on how a single moment of crisis had catalyzed such profound change. Sometimes it takes hitting rock bottom to find the strength to climb towards something better.
So, what about you?
Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with loved ones? What gave you the courage to finally stand up for yourself? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if you found this journey meaningful, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real talk about family dynamics and personal growth. Remember, sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most necessary healing. Thank you for being here with me today.